Halito, and welcome to Native Chalk Talk, a podcast by natives for all. Here we're keeping our Native ancestors' stories and history alive, while also sharing with you our Native culture, traditions, and more. I'm Rachel Youngman, a Choctaw originally from Anadarko, Oklahoma. I hope you'll enjoy this journey with me as we learn from our Native American guests. And I hope you'll do me a favor. Feel free to like and share these episodes. I so appreciate it. Yakuki.
I wanted to serve my country, but I joined the National Guard at 17 years old, and I went to basic training in between my junior and senior year. About 3 years in, I volunteered to go to Afghanistan, and I learned a lot about the Mongolian culture. I learned a lot about the Afghan culture. That opened my eyes that there's so much difference in the world, and a lot of people, they've never seen, just the privilege that sometimes we may have.
See and share our stories at togetherwe'remore.com.
Welcome to Native Chalk Talk, where we honor the stories, strength, and spirit of the Choctaw people and beyond. This month, in recognition of Memorial Day and Military Appreciation Month, we are paying special tribute to our Native American veterans, those who have served with honor, courage, and deep connection to their communities and land. Native people have the highest record of military service per capita of any ethnic group in the United States. And that's not just a statistic, it's a legacy, one that speaks to sacrifice, tradition, and resilience. But with that, Native American and Alaska Native veterans face disproportionately high rates of suicide compared to other groups in the United States. According to data from the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, Native veterans die by suicide at rates significantly higher than the national average, with some studies showing rates up to 2 times higher. Contributing factors include historical trauma, limited access to culturally appropriate mental health care, geographic isolation, and the lasting effects of military service. For younger Native male veterans, the suicide rate is especially alarming, highlighting the urgent need for community based, culturally informed interventions that honor Indigenous identities while addressing behavioral health. Programs that reconnect veterans with nature, traditional practices, and community support have shown promise in reducing risk and restoring hope. Today, I'm honored to sit down with Choctaw veteran Teyler Williston, who served our country and now serves his community through behavioral health work for veterans and carries on a family legacy rooted in service, protection, and deep cultural pride. Let's dive into Teyler's story, one that spans generations from the Light Horseman to today's Honor Guard. Teyler, welcome to Native Chalk Talk. We are honored to have you here for our special tribute to Native American veterans. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty great. Yeah.
Well, let's start with your roots. Can you tell us about where you're from and where you live now?
Yeah, I grew up in Idabel, Oklahoma, which is deep southeast Curtin County. And I currently live in Durant. I've lived in Durant since 2019.
So, what was life like growing up in Idabel, Oklahoma?
Can be a bit unique, yeah, growing up down there. Uh, where I grew up behind James Hodge Ford. Um, it's kind of like we consider it like the native hood down there. It's
Okay.
there's they're pretty rough neighborhoods. It's Ash Street and
Yeah.
Birch Street. Some parts of my life growing up without uh one parent or both parents around at that time made things a little more challenging. I was the kid in the neighborhood that had the trampoline, so everybody had always come over and um
So,
let me
you're
like
Mr.
our play.
Popular. Well, you mentioned to me that you used to spend time running around a ranch with your dad and your Uncle Boo. What are some memories that stand out from that time?
Yeah, I think my dad moved out there when I was probably about 9 years old. We lived down there at the ranch in Tom. It's a Choctaw Nation ranch, and that place is huge. Um, I remember a lot of times my dad and my stepmom were out there working, uh, mending fence along the huge sections of fence
Yeah.
by themselves. So I would get out there when I could. to help them out. And it taught me a lot. Taught me a lot about hard work growing up. My uncle and my dad used to take me down to uh Red River, and we'd go fish out there, and we'd start a little fire along the water. It's kind of like what's I still remember how to get down there. We went down there so many times.
So this Uncle Boo, can you describe him for us?
Yeah. Um, he was a really laid back guy. Um, he was around, he was in the military around the Vietnam era. He was Army Airborne at the time in Vietnam. So it always made me wonder, and what he possibly saw while he was over there. These are just kind of questions that I wish I had the opportunity to sit down with him now to ask.
Oh my gosh. Don't we all regret not doing more of that?
He would always come help out on the ranch growing up. Or he would say go out there take me fishing. Um, or he would talk to me about if I had a question about football or a question about ranching.
You have a deep family history in law enforcement.
My grandpa's name is William Josephus Williston. I guess everybody back then called him William J. He'd always wear some type of collared button-up shirt and a cowboy hat. And back then I was short, so he was tall to me back then. But
But
I'm sh- I, I'm 6'2", so I think now I'd probably tower over him. But
he was larger in life than life to you, it sounds like.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, he always had a garden, and
Yeah.
he would take me and my sister out, and he would just kind of show us, what plan is this, what plan is that, and uh, it, he wasn't always talkative, but it's like what I remember, vaguely remember, I was 8 years old when he passed. Whenever he would speak, he had a lot of volume to what he spoke about.
So he was in law enforcement. Tell us about that.
He literally did law enforcement right up until he passed away. I remember my dad mentioned that he was at Pearl Harbor as an Army MP when all of that happened, and
Hmm.
I believe he did 3, if not 4 years in the Army, and then left. And I'm not sure when that law enforcement career started. And he did that for decades. Um, and then it's just kind of ran in the family. And I believe even my dad has mentioned that I guess I think my dad's uncle or great uncle was one of the traditional light horsemen that rode on the horses. And dad would say that uh, this uncle, which I can't remember his name, um, he would ride out for, 3 or 4 days at a time, and he'd come back home and just kind of hang around and kind of rest, feed his horse. And I believe dad said that the his wife that he was with at that time would, make biscuits or some sort of travel food, and he would,
Nice.
saddle back up and take off again. So my grandpa, he was a Choctaw Lighthorseman, and I'm not for sure. I'm not sure how many agencies he had worked with over the years. I say that because I do have a McCurtain County Sheriff's Deputy badge of his.
That's
Um,
so cool.
and then I also have it's kind of like it's a wreath that he would pin on his uniform. It just kind of shaped like this, and
Hmm.
it says Light Horseman on the bottom.
You had mentioned to me a powerful moment at his funeral that stayed with you. Can you tell us about that story?
I remember sitting at the pew during his funeral, and we had to stand up. And I was 8 years old at the time, so I wasn't aware of a whole lot of what was going on. And I remember there were a bunch of sharp dressed uh, veterans that had walked in, marched in, and they were there to fold the flag and give honors to my grandpa. Even to this day, it's still that memory still sticks with me. It's kind of funny. Uh, Whenever I got into honor guard for myself, and during one of the interview questions they asked me, I believe they had asked me what made me want to join the honor guard, and that was what I had mentioned of. And one of the older guys that was there, he kind of moved his head, and he said, "Who's your grandpa?" I said William Williston. I said he passed away in August of 2000, and he was like, he said, "Oh yeah, we were there for that." And
No way.
yeah,
Now, you had a dream before you went off to college. What was that dream about?
at the time I was living uh, with my grandma Williston. In the dream, I was sitting at this little burger joint just kind of down the road from their house in Idabel. And they used to call it S. Wilkes. And I think it's now a barbecue place. It's really, really good.
Yum.
Somehow I appeared in the passenger seat of my grandpa's old truck. He drove it was like a 1970s or 80s Ford F-150. It was blue. He was eating a burger and he had asked me if I had wanted to take a bite of the burger, if I wanted something to eat. And I just told him no. And I guess just at that time, I was really grateful and, all the emotions of, happy, excited to be able to sit there with him, even
Oh,
just for a brief moment. And it felt so real. And then it was just kind of like we teleported. He and I both were in the truck and the truck just shot up in the air and we like teleported right next to their house. When we got to the house, he was kind of leaning up along the hood. I'm still sitting in the passenger seat, so I just kind of shimmy over to the driver's seat and get out. And I shut the door. I walked over to him and I placed my hand on his left shoulder and said, "Hey, Grandpa." I said, "Is everything okay or what's wrong?" And he turned around and he was like the healthiest I'd ever seen him. I think he was about 70 in his mid 70s when he passed away. But when he turned around, he looked younger and he had a cowboy hat, his jeans on, and his collared shirt. He was happy and healthy. Told me that he had made it to heaven, and uh, he was really big into the Bible as a Christian man. Still breaks my heart that that was the last dream I'd ever had of him. Haven't had any of him since then, but that's always stuck with me. I believe that was around September of 2011, a few months before I moved off, and then well within about, about 6 months before I signed up for the military.
I feel like you can almost picture it in your head as if it had just happened. That dream just happened yesterday.
Really makes me miss, those times in my childhood where, if I could go back and just sit with them more.
Oh, so much. I relate to that a lot. These ancestors on this wall behind me, every single one of them, I wish the ones that were alive when I was younger, I wish I would have asked more questions. I mean, I think we could all kick ourselves for not doing more of that. Well, it sounds like you had just great fond memories of him, and he sounded like a really great man. So it's no wonder you wanted to honor him today by talking about him. So, what led you to join the Air Force Reserves? Can you walk us through your journey into the military?
Looking back from my experience with what what I did in the military as an Air Force firefighter, and going through CLEAT, when I was in college through the COPS program at East Central,
Hmm.
um, working in the jail, working in the psych hospital. I think just being a first responder kind of runs in the family.
Yeah.
My cousins are both travel light horsemen as well down in Otterville. I wanted to have more education. Small town kid coming from Otterville, going to a college just 2.5 hours away was kind of a bit much for me. It's almost kind of like I was always searching for searching for a bigger challenge growing up.
Okay.
I ended up just spoke with a recruiter, kind of on the DL. I didn't tell my mom until probably 2 weeks before I signed up, before I signed the dotted line. Because I did some research at the time. I said, the Air Force sounds really cool. The Marines sound really cool too. And uh, I'm not really sure what made me decide one way or the other. I think in a way my body kind of thanks me that I went Air Force instead of the Marines. Uh, but
And you were at Tinker Air Force Base for a while, right?
yeah, yeah, that's where I was stationed for my 6 years that I was in.
Yeah. And any memorable moments from that time?
As a firefighter, especially a new firefighter, you're usually the plugman. So you're the guy that when you roll up on scene and you hop off, you're the first guy to hop off and you have to sprint to the back of the truck. And I say fast walk because falling with 75 pounds of gear hurts. And
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine.
as a plugman, you got to step off first and you run to the back of the truck and you just grab some of the hose off and then uh, take off towards the fire hydrant and you know take the coupling off and put the water hose on there and then tighten everything up and then you start getting the water out. I remember I was on the hand line. It was in a training environment, but I was on the hand line. So for this particular exercise, we do this training in kind of around February or March of every year, just because if you put on all of this gear, it's additional gear that we have to put on, but it's a check mark that we have to do every year. We do that in that time of the year because it's still cold, even though you're still burning up when you put all this gear on. Yeah, you kind of go into like MOP level 4 gear, which is not like a hazmat suit, but it's more of biochemical weapon gear. These pants, and then you put on a jacket, and then you put on these rubber boots, and you have to slip your whole boot. Inside of this boot, it's a rubber boot and it fits like a glove, and you have to tighten everything down on
Yeah.
the ankles and the feet. And then you have to put on 2 sets of gloves. And then you have to slip on your
Yes.
fire mask. Then you have to put a hood over, and then you just have to make sure everything is sealed. And then after that, then you put on all of your fire gear. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, you put on all of your fire gear, and then the pants, jacket, uh, 75 pound uh, air pack, SCBA. And I had initially said that you put on the rubber boots over your work boots, your uniform boots. You would take those work boots off, put the rubber boots on, and then slip into your actual fire boots. Um, so your body is just completely covered. Mask gets foggy and things start getting hot. You buckle everything up, cinch everything down, and then you do buddy checks on whoever you're going in there with for that exercise. So I didn't really take like physical fitness as serious in my early 20s to mid 20s, well, not like I should have. And I wish I would have. Our fire training building it's like a 2-story building, and you still have to pull the fire hose into the structure, and
Mhm.
then you still have to pull it all the way up to the second level, and then when you spray the water onto the training fire, that's usually about 130 to 150 psi coming out of uh the water pressure coming out of the fire hose. When you kind of tack all that into account, things get pretty heavy pretty quick. And
Yeah.
I remember, I think we were right in the middle of everything. And looking back, I'll kind of laugh at myself. If something happens, I'm the first guy that's gonna laugh at myself if I'm not hurt. And
Right.
uh, so that time, I felt I was pretty upset at myself. I was like, I'm 21, 22 years old. I shouldn't be falling out like this. We ended up having to stop the training exercise, which I wasn't the first and I wasn't the last throughout my time. That was my last
Sure.
time ever having to go through that. I took physical fitness a little bit more serious at that point, after that point, and
Wow. So it made you get your rear in
I
gear.
stay pretty fit to this day. Uh,
Yeah.
going on long kayak rides or hiking 10 miles at a time.
I can't even imagine suiting up like that with all of that weight on you and then also having to function. You have to go in there and be able to maneuver in tight places sometimes or whatever the case is and then be able to put out fires. I don't know how y'all do that. So thank you for that. You're now second in command on the Honor Guard. Why don't you describe what the Honor Guard does and your role as second in command?
It truly is an honor to be a part of a leadership role within Honor Guard for the Choctaw Nation. Be able to bring honor to those family members and to that fallen veteran. I fold the flag, and then I'll usually hand it off to Bruce, our commander.
For people who don't understand what the Honor Guard's role is, what do you all do?
It kind of depends on the event. Um, so we attend ceremonies, like such as powwows, like our biggest powwow we have here every November. So for the grand entries, we'll march in. All the dancers they corral around us, and then they play a war song. I usually hold the American flag, and everyone else we each have our own assigned flags. It kind of goes from like tallest to shortest.
Mhm.
And if we're at a powwow, we're presenting colors. Bruce, he normally holds the Eagle staff, and he stays out in front ahead of us, and then we all just kind of march behind him before the war song. As we present the colors, Bruce will normally ask, "Sir or ma'am, permission to present the colors." We present the colors, and then he'll say, "Order arms," and then we just kind of bring the colors back towards us. Powwows are we consider those like our ceremonial events. We have the American flag, the Oklahoma flag, then the Choctaw flag, and the warrior flag, and then our POW missing in uh, missing in action flag.
That's a very important thing y'all also do is you're at the military funeral services.
We stage everything. We may have usually nine to 12 people on average at funerals. We have seven to hold the rifles, and then we have someone that's on the bugle that plays taps. For me and a couple others, after we fire the rifles, we'll kind of set our weapons to the next person to hold, while me and a couple others, including Bruce, will go over towards the flag and we'll start folding. So sometimes it's me uh, folding the flag, and Bruce, he holds the flag, and he's the one that here lately he'll hand it off to one of our elders within Honor Guard to present the flag in Choctaw.
And what an honor. And thank you for doing that for our families of our fallen soldiers.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this series.
Thanks for listening to Native Chalk Talk. Be sure to join our community on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check us out at nativechalktalk.com. Stay tuned for the next episode. You're going to love it. Yakoki. Thank you, my friends.